The bridge of the hegemony patrol cruiser Vindication hummed with the gentle harmonics that indicated all systems operating within optimal parameters. Commander Zixtal's crystalline carapace caught the soft blue glow of the navigation displays. As she reviewed the day's patrol route through Sector 7, her species, the Veltar had evolved from reef builders on their homeworld's vast coral seas, and their ships reflected this heritage-curved organic lines that flowed like living organisms through the void. Commander Navigation Officer Tessara chirped. From her station, her voice carrying the melodic tones that all Veltar used for routine communication. "We're detecting an anomalous energy signature bearing Tusavan Mark IV, distance approximately 40,000 kilometers. Zixtal's primary eyes swiveled toward the tactical display, while her secondary eyes remained fixed on the patrol schedule. After 3 centuries of service, first as a junior science officer and now as a patrol commander, she had encountered dozens of first-contact scenarios. The galaxy was vast, and new species regularly achieved basic spaceflight, usually stumbling into hegemony space with primitive fusion drives and wide-eyed wonder at discovering they weren't alone. "Classification?" she asked, already anticipating the familiar pattern. "A crude metal cylinder, probably spinning for artificial gravity, with basic life support and perhaps some rudimentary communication equipment." "Unknown, Commander, the energy signature is ... inconsistent with our databases." Tessara's tendrils flickered uncertainty colors. "Shall I initiate standard first contact protocols?" "Proceed. Set course to intercept minimum velocity. We don't want to alarm them." Zixtal settled into her command station, feeling the ship's gentle acceleration as they adjusted course. The hegemony had refined first contact procedures over millennia. Approach slowly, demonstrate peaceful intent, offer assistance if needed, and gently guide the newcomers toward hegemony integration protocols. It was routine, almost ceremonial, as they closed distance. The tactical display began resolving details that made Zixtal's tertiary eyes narrow in confusion. The vessel was indeed metallic, but its design defied easy categorization, where most emerging species built spherical or cylindrical ships for structural efficiency. This craft appeared to be assembled from angular segments that didn't quite match. The forward section looked almost predatory-pointed and aggressive, while the rear displayed a cluster of drive systems that seemed overlarge for the ship's mass. "Science Officer, Kethera to the bridge," Zixtal commanded through the ship's bioneural network. Within moments, the young Veltar scientist emerged from the lift, her academic markings still showing the bright blues of recent education. "Commander." Kethera's voice carried the higher harmonics of curiosity mixed with nervous anticipation. This would likely be her first direct xenological contact. "Initial scan of the vessel, please. Full spectrum analysis." Zixtal gestured toward the forward view screen, where the alien ship now appeared as a detailed hologram rotating slowly for their inspection. Kethera's specialized scanning organs extended from her cranial cavity, interfacing directly with the ship's sensor array. For several minutes, waves of data flowed through the bridge, displays electromagnetic signatures, thermal patterns, material composition estimates, and structural analysis. "Fascinating," Kethera murmured, her voice taking on the clinical tones. "Of scientific observation, the vessel appears to be constructed primarily of refined iron alloys with carbon reinforcement, primitive by our standards, but remarkably robust. The design suggests they've prioritized structural integrity over efficiency." "Life signs?" Zixtal asked, though she could already see the bioscanner displays showing faint organic signatures distributed throughout the ship's interior. "Confirmed, approximately 8 individual life forms currently in what appears to be induced hibernation. Their metabolic rates are severely reduced, consistent with long-term space travel capabilities." Kethera paused, her scanning organs retracting slightly. "Commander, there are some unusual readings. The hibernation technology appears quite sophisticated, more advanced than we typically see from species achieving basic spaceflight. Perhaps they're refugees," suggested Tessera from navigation. "A more advanced species might have given them the technology to escape some catastrophe." Zixtal nodded thoughtfully. Such scenarios weren't uncommon. Sometimes species achieve spaceflight through necessity rather than natural technological progression. aided by benefactor races or driven by planetary disasters. Weapon systems, she asked, following standard assessment protocols. Cathera's harmonics shifted to confusion. This is where the readings become truly puzzling. Commander, they appear to be using kinetic projectile launchers, essentially sophisticated versions of chemical propulsion weapons. But the sophistication is in the projectiles themselves, not the delivery system. I'm detecting exotic matter signatures that I can't fully identify. Show me, Zixtal commanded. The main display shifted to show cross-sectional views of the alien vessel. Highlighted in yellow were several turret-like structures that could indeed be primitive weapons. But the detailed scans revealed launch tubes with magnetic acceleration systems and projectile storage areas containing what the computer tagged as unknown composite materials. They've taken an ancient concept hurling objects at high velocity and refined it to an extraordinary degree, Kethera explained, her voice carrying academic excitement. It's like discovering a species that perfected stone tools to the point where they rival energy weapons. Curious, Zixtal found herself genuinely intrigued. Most species followed predictable technological development paths. Energy weapons typically replaced projectile systems within a few centuries of their invention. To see a species that had continued refining, kinetic weapons suggested either unusual environmental pressures or simply a different approach to problem solving. Commander, Communications Officer Van Thick announced from his station. I'm detecting automated systems activating aboard the vessel. It appears their navigation computers are running some kind of diagnostic sequence. Distance to our vessel, still 38,000 kilometers, Commander, well outside their sensor range, assuming their detection capabilities match their apparent technological level. Zixtal made a decision that, in retrospect, would change the course of galactic history. Maintain position and continue passive observation. Let's see what they do when they fully activate their systems. Sometimes you learn more about a species by watching them when they think they're alone. The bridge crew settled into observation mode, their instruments trained on the alien vessel as its various systems came online. Interior lighting activated in sections, revealing glimpses of corridors and chambers through the ship's few transparent ports. The drive systems began cycling through what appeared to be startup sequences, and various communication arrays extended from the hull like technological flowers blooming in the void. Their revival sequence is initiating, Kethera reported. I'm detecting increased metabolic activity from the hibernating crew members. They should be conscious within the hour. Zixtal felt the familiar anticipation of first contact. Soon they would meet another species taking their first tentative steps into the galactic community. She would guide them through the standard protocols, offer assistance with their obviously limited resources, and help them understand their place in the greater hegemony. She had no way of knowing that within that seemingly primitive vessel, 8 members of humanity's most elite deep space reconnaissance unit were about to wake up in what they would immediately recognize as potentially hostile territory. Nor could she imagine that their primitive weapons were designed to function in environments where energy shields were common, or that their crude construction techniques had been perfected through centuries of warfare against opponents with technology far superior to the hegemony's ceremonial defense systems. The alien vessel's systems continued their activation sequence as Science Officer Cathara initiated more comprehensive scans. Her specialized organs interfaced deeper with the Vindication's sensor array, drawing power from the ship's bioneural network to penetrate the stranger's hull with increasingly sophisticated analytical techniques. Commander Cathera announced, her voice carrying undertones of perplexity. The material composition analysis is revealing some truly anomalous results. Zixtal moved closer to the science station, her curiosity overriding command protocols. In her 3 centuries of service, she had rarely encountered anything that genuinely puzzled the hegemony's advanced xenological databases. Elaborate, the hull appears to be constructed in layers, Cathara explained, her tendrils manipulating holographic displays that showed cross-sectional views of the alien ship. The outer layer is indeed basic steel alloy, roughly equivalent to what we might expect from a species that has recently mastered metallurgy. But beneath that, the display zoomed deeper, revealing internal structures that made Zixtal's secondary eyes flutter in confusion. The inner hull contains materials I cannot properly classify. The atomic structure suggests controlled manipulation, At the quantum level, essentially, they've created custom elements with properties that shouldn't be stable under normal conditions. Perhaps their homeworld has unusual physical laws, suggested Navigation Officer Tisera. Some species evolved in environments with variable physics, developing technologies that seemed impossible by standard galactic norms. That's what I initially thought, Cathara replied, but these materials appear to be artificially created. Look at this section here. She highlighted a portion of the ship's armored belt. The molecular structure shows clear signs of industrial fabrication, but the process would require energy manipulation techniques that surpass even our own capabilities. Zixtal studied the readouts with growing concern. The hegemony represented the pinnacle of peaceful technological development. Their sciences had been refined over millennia by dozens of species working in harmony. If these primitives possessed manufacturing capabilities beyond hegemony understanding, it suggested either outside intervention or a fundamentally different approach to physics. Continue scanning. Focus on their weapon systems, she ordered. Cathara's organs extended further, drawing more power from the ship's bioneural network. The tactical displays updated with increasingly detailed information about the alien vessel's armaments. And each new revelation made the bridge crew's harmonics shift toward frequencies associated with unease. Commander, these are not primitive, kinetic weapons, Cathara announced, her academic excitement replaced by something approaching alarm. The projectiles are contained in what appears to be magnetic suspension fields. Each round masses approximately 10 kilograms, but the isotopic composition suggests they contain controlled fusion reactions in dormant states. Fusion projectiles? Zixtal's voice carried disbelief. That would make each round equivalent to a tactical nuclear device. Precisely, but that's not the most disturbing aspect. Cathara manipulated the display to show the weapon systems. Loading mechanisms. They have approximately 4,000 of these projectiles in their ammunition storage. Commander, this single vessel carries enough firepower to sterilize a small moon. The bridge fell silent, except for the gentle harmonics of the ship's bioneural systems. Zixtal processed this information with growing alarm. No peaceful species developed such devastating weapons. Even the hegemony's most advanced defensive platforms relied on energy shields and deflection fields rather than weapons of mass destruction. Perhaps they come from a system with dangerous wildlife, Tisera suggested hopefully. Some species develop powerful weapons to deal with hostile planetary conditions. Cathara's continued analysis began revealing additional disturbing details. I'm detecting atmospheric processors in their cargo bay, she reported, but the specifications are troubling. These systems appear designed to render atmospheres unbreathable rather than to create habitable environments. Terraforming equipment, anti-terraforming equipment, Commander, they can take a life-supporting atmosphere and convert it to something toxic to most carbon-based life forms. The chemical processes involved would create atmospheric conditions suitable only for their own species. Zixtal felt her carapace. Plates shifting involuntarily. A physiological response to extreme stress that she hadn't experienced since her first deep space assignment. Show me their crew quarters. The display shifted to reveal the interior sections where the hibernating aliens would soon wake. What Cathara discovered there made the previous revelations seem almost benign by comparison. Commander, these are not standard crew quarters. They're reinforced containment facilities. The science officer's voice carried harmonics of genuine fear. The sleeping chambers are constructed to withstand explosive decompression, extreme acceleration forces, and what appears to be deliberate internal sabotage. They don't trust their own crew. It's worse than that. Look at these restraint systems. Cathara highlighted mechanical devices integrated into each sleeping chamber. These aren't safety harnesses for acceleration protection. They're designed to immobilize the occupants completely. The crew quarters include automated sedation systems, neural inhibition fields, and what can only be described as torture devices. Zixtal stared at the readouts in horror. They're prisoners, no commander. I believe these are control systems designed to manage their own crew during combat operations. The neural inhibition fields are configured to suppress emotional responses. While enhancing aggressive impulses, the automated systems appear designed to artificially induce combat states in the crew. The implications struck Zixtal like a physical blow. This wasn't a peaceful exploration vessel that had developed powerful weapons for protection. This was a warship designed to fight battles so intense that the crew required artificial enhancement and physical restraint to remain functional during combat. What manner of species develops technology to turn their own people into weapons? Tissera whispered, her harmonics barely audible. Kethera's analysis continued, revealing increasingly disturbing details. Commander, I'm detecting medical facilities that appear designed for battlefield surgery. The equipment includes automated systems for trauma treatment, organ replacement, and what appears to be neurological modification procedures. These beings expect to suffer catastrophic injuries as a routine part of their operations, and the life support systems, minimal by our standards, but incredibly robust. They can apparently survive on recycled atmosphere for extended periods with backup. Systems that could maintain life even if 90% of their ship was destroyed. It's as if they've designed their entire vessel around the assumption that they will face overwhelming hostile forces. Zixtal realized with growing dread that they weren't observing a primitive species taking their first steps into space. We're witnessing something far more dangerous, a species that had developed space travel as an extension of warfare. A people who had refined the art of violence to such a degree that their exploration vessels were more heavily armed than most. Hegemony defensive installations. Commander, Communications Officer, Benthic announced, I'm detecting increased activity in their communication arrays. The automated systems appear to be attempting to establish contact with other vessels. Other vessels, Zixtal's voice, cracked with strain. How many others? Unknown, Commander, but the signal strength suggests they're trying to reach transmitters at considerable distance. This may not be an isolated contact. The peaceful bridge of the Vindication had become a place of mounting terror as the implications became clear. This wasn't first contact with a single primitive vessel. They had encountered the advanced scout of a species that treated warfare as a natural state of existence. Beings who had turned their own crew into weapons and their ships into instruments of destruction. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, their signals were reaching out to others of their kind. The hibernating crew began showing signs of awakening, their metabolic rates increasing as automated systems prepared them for consciousness. Soon these warriors would be awake, alert, and undoubtedly scanning their surroundings for threats. Zixtal realized that within moments, the most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever known would be staring directly at her ship. The hibernation chambers aboard the human vessel began their final revival sequence with mechanical precision that spoke of countless iterations and refinements. Through their enhanced sensors, the crew of the Vindication watched and fascinated. Horror, as automated systems flooded the alien ship's corridors with a cocktail of stimulants, combat enhancers, and atmospheric supplements that would have been lethal to most known species. Commander Cathara reported, her voice tight with scientific curiosity warring against primal fear. Their revival process is unlike anything in our xenobiological databases. The chemical compounds being introduced into their atmosphere include substances that would trigger hyperaggressive responses in most carbon-based lifeforms. Zixtal observed the readouts with growing unease. The Veltar had developed hibernation technology millennia ago, but their systems were designed for peaceful, awakening gradual temperature increases, gentle hormone regulation, and soothing harmonic frequencies to ease the transition back to consciousness. What she was witnessing looked more like a deliberate preparation for immediate combat. They're chemically conditioning themselves for violence before they're even fully conscious, she murmured, the implications chilling her to her crystalline core. The first signs of movement came from the chamber nearest to what appeared to be the vessel's command center. Through the transparent aluminum viewing port, they could see a bipedal figure beginning to stir. The being was roughly humanoid in shape, but built along lines that suggested evolution had prioritized physical power over efficiency. Broad shoulders, dense musculature, and movement patterns that spoke of controlled violence even in the simple act of awakening. Look at their physiological structure, Kethera observed, her scanner organs focused intently on the emerging crew. Dense bone structure, redundant organ systems, and what appears to be natural armor plating beneath their skin. These beings evolved for warfare. The first human captain, Sarah Chen, though the aliens had no way of knowing her name or rank sat, Up in her hibernation chamber with fluid grace that immediately caught Zixtal's attention, there was no disorientation, no gradual adjustment to consciousness that characterized normal awakening from extended hibernation. The human's eyes opened, scanned her immediate environment in a systematic pattern that spoke of tactical training, and identified potential threats and resources within seconds. Commander Tissera whispered from the navigation station, "Observe how they move." More chambers were opening now, releasing 7 additional humans into the ship's corridors. Each awakening followed the same pattern-instant alertness, immediate environmental assessment, and smooth transition into coordinated movement. They didn't stumble or require assistance. They emerged from hibernation like weapons being activated. What terrified the Velter observers most was the human's body language. Every gesture, every movement spoke of beings who expected violence at any moment. They didn't walk through their ship's corridors. They advanced through them, maintaining sightlines, checking corners, positioning themselves to cover each other's movements. Even in the safety of their own vessel, they moved like soldiers in hostile territory. "They're performing weapons checks," Kethera reported, her voice barely above a whisper. "They've been conscious for less than 10 minutes, and their first priority is ensuring their armaments are functional." Through their sensors, the aliens watched as the humans methodically inspected their equipment. Personal weapons were drawn, examined, and tested. Ammunition counts were verified. Communication devices were activated and tested. Every action was performed with mechanical efficiency that spoke of endless repetition and training. "Commander," Communications Officer Venthic announced, "they've activated their sensor array. They're scanning local space." Zixtal felt her carapace plates lock in a defensive configuration. "Do they have the capability to detect us at this range?" Their sensors appear to be primarily passive listening for energy signatures, rather than active scanning. However, their technology is more sophisticated than initial estimates suggested. "If they conduct an active sensor sweep, they will detect us," Zixtal finished grimly. Captain Chen moved to what was obviously the vessel's command station, her movements economical and purposeful, even from a distance of 38,000 kilometers. The aliens could observe through their advanced sensors as she began activating ship systems with the fluid competence of someone who had performed these actions thousands of times under stress. "Look at their command interface," Kethera observed. "The control systems are designed for rapid operation under extreme conditions. No decorative elements, no comfort features. Everything is optimized for function during combat situations." The human captain's hands moved across control surfaces with practiced efficiency, bringing weapon systems online, activating defensive screens, and establishing communication protocols. But what struck the observers as most unnerving was her expression, calm, focused, and completely devoid of fear or wonder at finding herself in an unknown region of space. "She's not curious about where they are," Tissera observed with growing alarm. "She's preparing for a fight." The other crew members had spread throughout the ship, each taking positions that the aliens recognized as tactical deployments. Humans moved to what were obviously weapon control stations. Another positioned herself at what appeared to be damage control systems. One took position at sensors, while others moved to engineering stations that would allow rapid modification of ship systems during combat. "They're going to battle stations," Zixtal realized with growing horror. "They've awakened in unknown space and immediately assumed they're under threat." Commander Venthic reported urgently, "They're powering up their active sensor array. If they conduct a full sweep, the human ship's sensors came online with power levels that immediately registered on the Vindication's detection systems. The energy signature was impossible to mask, and Captain Chen's tactical display would now show a large vessel maintaining position, exactly 38,000 kilometers away, well within weapon range for the fusion projectiles they carried. Through their passive monitors, the aliens watched as the human captain studied the contact information with the cold calculation of a predator evaluating prey. She didn't show surprise at discovering they weren't alone. She didn't display the wonder or excitement that characterized most species' first contact with alien intelligence. Instead, she began issuing orders in what were obviously preparations for combat engagement. "They're targeting us," Kethera announced, her voice carrying harmonics of pure terror. "Their weapon systems are tracking our position." The humans moved with coordinated precision that spoke of endless training and actual combat experience. Each crew member knew their role, understood their responsibilities, and executed their duties with mechanical efficiency. There was no discussion, no debate, no consultation. The captain issued brief, clipped orders, and her crew responded with immediate compliance. Commander Tissera reported, "They're charging their weapon systems. Fusion projectile launchers are coming online." Zixtal watched in paralyzed fascination as the human crew prepared to potentially destroy her ship and everyone aboard it. But what truly terrified her was the casual efficiency with which they performed these actions. This wasn't panic or fear. Driving their responses was standard operating procedure for beings who had encountered unknown contacts before and dealt with them through superior firepower. "They're not exploring," she whispered, finally understanding the true horror of what they faced. "They're hunting." Captain Chen completed her tactical assessment and began transmitting on frequencies that suggested she was attempting to contact other vessels. The communication wasn't a call for help or a report of first contact with alien intelligence. Based on the transmission patterns, she was reporting the discovery of a potential target and requesting permission to engage. Commander Venthic announced with barely controlled panic, "They're receiving responses to their transmission. Multiple vessels are acknowledging their communication." The peaceful bridge of the Vindication had become a place of absolute terror as the implications became undeniably clear. They hadn't encountered a lost exploration vessel or refugees from a distant catastrophe. They had stumbled upon advanced scouts for a species that treated first contact as a prelude to conquest. Beings who had refined the art of warfare to such a degree that even their initial response to discovering alien intelligence was to prepare for battle. And somewhere in the darkness of space, other ships, other predators, were responding to Captain Chen's call, moving toward their position. With hostile intent, the age of peace in the galaxy had just ended, and the hegemony didn't even know it yet. While the human crew continued their methodical preparations for potential combat, Science Officer Cathera focused her considerable analytical capabilities on penetrating the alien vessel's information systems. Her specialized neural interfaces, evolved for peaceful data gathering and scientific observation, probed the human's cultural database with the same gentle persistence the Veltar used for studying stellar phenomena. Commander Cathara announced, "I've successfully accessed their primary cultural archive. Standard xenological protocol suggests, beginning with their historical records, to understand their developmental patterns." Zixtal, still watching the human's tactical preparations with growing alarm, nodded absently. "Proceed. We need to understand what we're dealing with." What Cathara discovered in the first few microseconds of data access would haunt her for the remainder of her existence. The initial historical entries she encountered weren't chronicles of scientific discovery, artistic achievement, or social progress. They were military records. "Commander," her voice carried new harmonics frequencies the Veltar used only when confronted with concepts so alien they challenged fundamental understanding. Their earliest recorded history consists entirely of warfare documentation. Perhaps their archives prioritize recent military conflicts. Zixtal suggested, hopefully. Many species maintain detailed records of their struggles for independence or significant defensive wars. No, Commander. These records span their entire recorded history. Over 12,000 years of continuous warfare. Cathara's scanning organs retracted slightly, a physiological response to overwhelming data input. They have no periods of extended peace, none. Their civilization has been engaged in active military conflict for its entire existence. The main display updated to show a timeline of human history constructed from their database entries. What appeared was a continuous red line marking active conflicts, with brief intervals that represented not peace, but merely reorganization between wars. "Surely there must be some mistake," Tissera whispered from navigation. "No species could survive continuous warfare for millennia." Cathera delved deeper into the database, her scientific training warring with growing horror at what she discovered. "They don't merely survive it, Navigation Officer. They thrive on it. Look at these technological development records." The display shifted to show human advancement patterns. Unlike the collaborative, peaceful development that characterized hegemony civilizations, human progress followed a pattern of military innovation driving civilian application. Their mathematics had been developed for ballistics calculations. Their chemistry emerged from explosives research. Their metallurgy advanced through armor and weapon development. Every significant breakthrough in their science stems from military applications, Kathera reported, her voice carrying disbelief. They developed space travel, not for exploration, but to gain tactical advantages over their enemies. Their first orbital installations were weapons platforms. What about their cultural development? Zixtal asked, desperately hoping to find evidence of peaceful aspects to human civilization. Art, literature, philosophy. Kathera accessed the humans' cultural records and immediately regretted it. Commander, their entertainment consists of simulated violence. Their literature celebrates warfare. Their philosophical traditions focus on concepts like honor in battle and victory through superior firepower. The display showed examples of human entertainment, media films, games, and interactive experiences that glorified combat, celebrated warriors, and treated violence as the ultimate solution to complex problems. What terrified Kathera most was the sophistication of these simulations. Humans didn't merely watch violence, they practiced it obsessively through increasingly realistic scenarios. They're children's games, she continued, her voice barely maintaining. Scientific objectivity are tactical training exercises. They teach their young to think strategically, to identify weaknesses in opponents, to coordinate group attacks. Child development on their world involves learning to kill efficiently. Zixtal stared at the cultural data in absolute horror. The Veltar raised their young in collective harmony pools, where cooperation and mutual support were learned through play and shared experience. The idea of training children for violence was beyond her comprehension. What drove them to such extremes? She asked. What environmental pressures could create such a species? Kathera accessed geological and environmental data from Earth's history. What she found provided no comfort. Their homeworld has experienced multiple mass extinction events, climate catastrophes, and resource scarcities that would have eliminated most species. But instead of adapting through cooperation or migration, they adapted through competition and conflict. The data painted a picture of a world where survival required constant struggle, not just against environmental hazards, but against other humans competing for the same limited resources. Evolution had not merely selected for intelligence and adaptability, had specifically rewarded aggressive traits and tactical thinking. Commander, I'm finding records of something they call total war, Kathera reported, her harmonics now carrying frequencies associated with existential dread. They have a concept of warfare that involves completely destroying enemy civilizations, not just defeating their military forces, but eliminating their entire cultural and genetic heritage. Genocide, Zixtal whispered, using a term from ancient hegemony historical studies that describe theoretical extremes of violence that no known species had actually practiced. They have detailed instructional materials on the subject, Kathera confirmed. Strategic bombing of civilian populations, chemical weapons designed to destroy agricultural systems, systematic elimination of cultural records. They have refined genocide into a science. The science officer continued her exploration of human cultural patterns, each discovery more terrifying than the last. Human languages contained extensive vocabularies for describing varieties of violence, with precise terms for different types of weapons, tactics, and combat scenarios. Their social structures were hierarchical systems based on combat effectiveness and strategic thinking. They have military ranks that translate roughly to those who kill efficiently, Kathera reported. Social advancement in their culture depends on demonstrated ability to destroy enemies. Their highest honors are awarded. For acts of violence, what about their exploration of space? Tissera asked. Surely expansion beyond their world would have reduced resource competition and promoted peace. Kathera accessed records of humanity's expansion beyond Earth, hoping to find evidence of peaceful development. Instead, she discovered something far worse. Commander, they didn't expand into space to reduce conflict. They expanded to find new enemies to fight. The database contained detailed records of humanity's conflicts with various alien species they had encountered during their expansion through local space. None of these contacts had resulted in peaceful coexistence or cultural exchange. Every single first contact scenario in human history had ended in warfare. with humanity either conquering or being repelled by the species they encountered. They have a term, Cathara continued, that translates roughly as aggressive expansion. They deliberately seek out other intelligent species for the purpose of military conquest. Space exploration, for humans, is essentially a hunting expedition. On a galactic scale, the most horrifying discovery came when Cathara accessed human demographic and resource allocation data. Commander, their population growth patterns are designed to support continuous military expansion. They produce what they call surplus population, individuals, specifically intended for military service in conquered territories. They breed for war, Zixtel realized with absolute horror. More than that, they have developed their entire civilization as a military machine designed for galactic conquest. Every aspect of their society, education, economics, social organization, technological developments serves the ultimate goal of expanding their territory through superior violence. The final revelation came when Cathara accessed recent human strategic planning documents. Commander, according to these records, the vessel we're observing is part of a larger fleet conducting what they call reconnaissance in force. They're scouting this region of space to identify targets for future military campaigns. The bridge of the Vindication fell silent as the implications became undeniably clear. They hadn't encountered a lost exploration vessel or refugees seeking new homes. They had stumbled upon advanced scouts for a species that had turned warfare into an art form, beings who viewed the galaxy not as a vast community of diverse civilizations, but as territory to be conquered through superior firepower. Every peaceful species in the hegemony, the gentle Veltar, the philosophical Zephyrians, the artistic Melodians, all of them were potential targets for a civilization that had spent 12 millennia perfecting the art of destroying other intelligent life. And according to the strategic documents Cathara had uncovered, humanity's war fleets were already en route to this sector of space. Commander, she whispered, we need to warn the hegemony, immediately. But even as she spoke, they all realized the terrible truth by the time any warning could reach hegemony space and defense.